And we are live for another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavone, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host, Andrew Johnson. And Johnson, it is that time of the year. The NFL Draft is this upcoming Thursday, which means it is time for our third annual All Gas No Breaks mock draft show here tonight. On the show, Johnson and I have been assigned each 16 teams for the 32 teams in this year's NFL season. We will be making our first round picks. Of course, no trades involved in this mock. There will be trades surely on the night one of the NFL draft, but for strict purposes, we'll just keep it to no trades here tonight on the show. Whatever team has their current pick is going to be making that pick on this one. And for us, we're going to see how many picks we get correct, how many picks we get within at least 5 picks within, and how many picks we get brutally and terribly wrong. But Johnson, for me, one of my favorite shows we do all year long, this mock draft show here tonight, and I am very excited to get this one started.
Absolutely, I'm excited as always, and we can go straight into it right now.
So what Johnson and I will be doing, as I mentioned, we each have been assigned 16 teams. Johnson has the even number team picks wise. I have the odd number picks wise. It works out for the both of us because our respective teams are in that slot. My Giants at 3, your Patriots at 4. So that will lead to us making our own selections for our very own teams. And while we do that as well, Johnson, when we get to that team, we're going to be breaking down some of the moves that team made in the offseason, as well as the big needs that team needs going into the 2025 season. And we'll start off with the team that's picking number 1 overall, and that being the Tennessee Titans. And let's be blunt, a very rough 2024 season for the Tennessee Titans. And now they come into this NFL draft with not much movement in this offseason. I mean, obviously, after having a bad year that they had, not a lot of teams will want to go there, unfortunately. Sorry if you're a Titans fan, but that was the truth. The 3-14 record last year. The big move they made this offseason was signing offensive tackle Dan Moore Jr. from the Pittsburgh Steelers. So realistically, Johnson, going into this draft, their biggest needs are quarterback, edge rusher, wide receiver, linebacker, and safety. With the first pick in the draft, I think for me, it's got to be Cam Ward. It just seems as if that's what everyone has been saying the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months. It has to be Cam Ward. I know they have Will Levis. I get it. It hasn't really worked out. Last year was kind of a debacle. They are having a new stadium coming in very shortly. There's also rumors that they could trade out of this pick too. I just don't see it happening unless it's something that they can't pass on. I'm going to go with Cam Ward from Miami to be the first overall pick in this year's 2025 draft.
Yeah, ADP on that is 2, but a lot of mock drafts or a lot of big boards have him at 20. So this is gonna be a case of the top 3 teams all need quarterbacks, and there's really no true overall, number 1 overall quarterback. You're no consensus top 5 QBs over these other guys. So it's gonna be interesting if these teams choose to go quarterback or can't miss prospect, and the Titans are gonna go quarterback.
Yeah. And you have an interesting pick with number 2, the Cleveland Browns, because they're in that sense of, do you take the quarterback because of the Deshaun Watson injury debacle and obviously him not playing good, or do you go best player available at this pick? Because as you mentioned, there are some really good, talented players in this draft this year.
So since they have to keep on paying Deshaun Watson, I don't think they're gonna pick a quarterback, and that's a spoiler. So in the offseason, the Cleveland Browns re-signed Myles Garrett after that big contract debacle, but they also traded for Kenny Pickett, a young, I guess, moldable quarterback, and they signed
Serviceable.
Joe Flacco.
Yep.
So they want to be competitive, but if they're not competitive, they could pull the plug on everything and just straight up tank for, let's say, Arch Manning next year, which is the way bigger prize than Shador Sanders or Cam Ward. So with that being said, the Cleveland Browns at number 2 are going to take Travis Hunter at
Okay.
number 2. Cornerback out of Colorado. They need They need wide receivers. They need a corner. He fits both, and I think that's that's a no brainer for them. Do I want them to take Travis Hunter? Absolutely not. But
Yeah, I
we'll
know. I
find
know
out.
your stance on Travis Hunter. You, being a Patriot fan, obviously would love to have the unicorn type player from Colorado who just won the Heisman Trophy be your DB, wide receiver one, whatever you want to count it as. And yeah, I'm not. I was surprised because I thought maybe you would just, for strict purposes, just try to pick someone else like a Shador Sanders, maybe, and just why not? So all right, that puts me now with the New York Giants, the third overall pick, and. Being a Giants fan has not been easy these last couple of years. And you look at what they've done in the offseason, Johnson, the big moves, obviously, Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, the two quarterbacks signing, maybe puts them out of the quarterback market. I don't necessarily think that is the case. They also signed Paulson Adebo and Javon Holland to bolster up that secondary, which is much needed. They brought back Darius Slayton, so I guess that's a little bit of a nice improvement at wide receiver. But, you look at the needs they have for the draft. Quarterback, obviously, the big need. Offensive line's been a need for the Giants over a decade now. Defensive line, linebacker, and wide receiver. But I don't think the Giants go with quarterback at this pick. I think maybe there's been rumors that they might trade up into the first round. Maybe just take a quarterback in the early second round. I don't think they go quarterback with this first round selection. I think they have to. You can't pass up on a guy that could be another guy that could easily go number one if the team at number one did need a quarterback as well. I'm going to go with Abdul Carter out of Penn State. It kind of just fits the Giants' need of, more pass rushers, more of those best player available type guys that you really can't pass up at this rate when you look at the draft. So I think it's a no-brainer for New York. Get Abdul Carter, bolster up that defense some more, and I think look at quarterback maybe on day 2, maybe even at the end of round 1 on night 1. So, well, we'll see what that happens. What about your New England Patriots?
Oh man, in the offseason, we got Stephon Diggs, a wide receiver vet we desperately need, but I did not want him due to age, and he's a diva, but whatever. We also got Carlton Davis, Harold Landry, and Milton Williams. The Patriots need desperately a wide receiver. We also need O line, D line, a running back, and a tight end. We have a couple tight ends signed. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. The running back isn't really an immediate need because of Ramondre Stevenson, but that offensive line, I couldn't pick out any of them. I'll be quite frank with you.
Of course, there is a quote-unquote generational type running back in this draft that might be a guy that you can't pass up on as well.
So I think with that being said, with Abdul Carter off the board, I wouldn't take him anyway. I can't justify taking Mason Graham over Gentry, so I'm taking Ashton Gentry out of Boise State to the Patriots.
Okay.
Not from Andre, but I think with this kind of talent at running back, you have your quarterback, you have your receiver, you have your running back. Buy your offensive line. You have so much money left in cap space. Just buy your offensive line.
That might be the first stunning pick of the draft because I thought maybe you would have went offensive line, but there is a good offensive. I think the good thing about this draft, for your sake, because you need offensive line and running back, there's an abundance at both of those positions, in my opinion. I think those are the two strongest positions in this draft alone. So it really comes down to, do you take that offensive lineman with the first pick and then take a guy like Omarion Hampton in the second round, or do you just take Ashton Gentry because he's just too good to pass up? So I don't hate the pick necessarily for you in that spot with Gentry going number 4.
I think there's four guys, either guards or tackles, you can get in the second round.
Yeah,
that I'd be okay with. So that's what I'm going to look at here.
Yeah, that's fair enough. We'll go to the next pick, that being the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not a really big offseason for them. The biggest thing they did in the offseason, Johnson, was pretty much just get rid of their talent. Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, just some of the notable talent they got rid of in the offseason. Their biggest signing they made was Jordan Lewis, the corner, to bolster up that secondary to a sense. But they need defensive line. They still need corner. They still need safety. They need offensive line, and they need wide receiver. I've seen this guy being mocked to them for so many weeks now. I think they just need it at this point because their defense is just that bad, in my opinion, and they really are in pretty much a rebuild mode right now. I think even adding a wide receiver would help Trevor Lawrence at the end of the day, but they need to fix the defense first before anything because that was losing them a lot of games last season as well. I'm going to go with Mason Graham from Michigan, the defensive interior lineman, to go number 5 to Jacksonville. As I mentioned, that's been pretty much, he's been a lock to Jacksonville for months, I feel like now. I feel like they're going to probably just, not delay the inevitable and just take him. He is a top 5 player, in my opinion, in this draft. You could make the case for it. So I think it's just perfect for Jacksonville. He kind of falls into their lap at number 5 and helps try to bolster up that defensive interior.
So that's going to bring us now to the next pick, which we're going to have
The Las Vegas Raiders.
with Las Vegas Raiders. A big offseason for them. I guess the biggest one is they trade for Geno Smith and they signed him for a big new contract, and they re-signed Max Crosby. So
Yes.
that being said, they need a running back, they need a receiver, they need cornerback, offensive line, and they need linebackers. But they're not taking any of that. I think they're going quarterback because Geno Smith is up there in age.
You still think they're going quarterback?
I still think they're going quarterback. I think they're going to pull a Falcons, to be honest with you.
I don't hate that logic. They could do it.
Geno Smith is going to be 35 years old.
Especially if Genty's off the board, they might be thinking about it. That's fair.
I think if Genty was here, they would 100% take Genty. But
yes,
let's be real. Geno Smith's going to be 35 this season. He'll be 36 the year after that. There's not many great quarterbacks after the age of 35. I realize Geno just had a great, let's call it, bounce back year, but he only threw for 21 touchdowns. 21 touchdowns and 15 picks. Sure, he threw the ball a lot. He threw it accurately, but he really wasn't lighting up the world. So that being said, I think they're going to take Shedeur from New Orleans. I think they're going to take Shedeur here.
Okay. Well, remember, Shedeur has a relationship with Tom Brady before, so it would make sense. I could see that.
And
I don't hate that.
Deion is going to have a lot of influence on where his son goes, whether you like it or not. And I think he would trust Tom Brady to, continue to mentor his son at quarterback. So I think this makes a lot of sense.
You've thrown me off already twice in this draft. We're only 6 picks in. I like it. I don't hate the logic because they could definitely. Remember, keep in mind, they have a new offensive coordinator in Chip Kelly. Obviously, a new head coach in Pete Carroll as well. So they might want to try to bolster that offense, even though they got Geno Smith for this season. So I agree with you. If Genty's off the board, they 100% might make this move. Or they might trade down. But as we mentioned, we're not doing trade downs. I think they could definitely do this move. So that then leads us to the next pick, which is the New York Jets at pick number 7. And we already know what offseason they had this season. The big moves, we know they got rid of Aaron Rodgers, so we have a new quarterback in New York, and that is Justin Fields for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was the big signing the Jets made this offseason. Their big needs are offensive line, wide receiver, tight end, safety, and defensive line. I think this pick is a no-brainer, Johnson. He's fallen to their laps. I would have gone originally with Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State, but Will Campbell from LSU is still there. I think it's a no-brainer. If he's still there at 7 for the Jets, he has to go number 7. I'll go with Will Campbell, the offensive tackle out of LSU, to go to the New York Jets.
Yeah, it makes complete sense here. I agree with you. And again, this is a team that could have used Shedeur, and they're not going to get him. So
probably look at the Jets maybe to draft a quarterback later in the draft, though. I think they will take one. It's very possible they could.
Speaking of teams that had potential quarterback problems, let's talk about the Carolina Panthers, who have the next pick in this draft. That is pick number 8, I believe.
Yes.
So they re-signed J.C. Horn, and they signed Trayvon Moehrig and Rico Dowdle. They need an edge rusher, cornerback, safety, wide receiver, and D-line. And I think it's kind of criminal this guy's fallen this far. McMillan out of Arizona, the top wide receiver in the draft. If you're going to trust your quarterback for one more year, which you should trust Bryce Young, the number 1 overall pick 2 seasons ago. I think you give him another shot here, and you give him a new weapon to play with. So give me McMillan out of Arizona, University of Arizona,
Yes.
To Carolina.
Okay. Yeah, Tedero McMillan, if not for Travis Hunter, obviously, being in this draft, would be the first receiver taken off the board. There is no question about that whatsoever. And he's a great talent. Going into the draft, I think originally was going to be a top 5 pick in the draft. And then some other players declared for the draft, so that moved him down the board a bit. He's kind of one of those guys that's been lingering around that 8 to 12 range in terms of where he's going to get picked. So I don't hate this pick. You mentioned Bryce Young. He needs some help either being on the offensive line or at his wide receiver position. I don't hate this necessarily. They don't really have big-name wide receivers right now in Carolina. They definitely could use it. So I like the pick with Tedero McMillan going to Carolina at pick number 8.
And I called him the first receiver off the board because Travis Hunter is more of an athlete. When you have the college draft, he's an athlete. He's not a true wide receiver or cornerback. He's both. So I can't Can you call him a true wide receiver? I really don't know.
He's a good wide receiver. He's best. He's the best receiver and corner in the draft, which is weird to say, but he is the best of both. Like I say, he's a unicorn type player. He's like that player that you don't see ever in the NFL, but
And
we
you know,
have that
the
happening
Browns
this year.
need both, so
Yeah,
makes
the Browns
sense.
definitely need both. So I don't hate that pick for McMillan going to Carolina. I think that's a nice fit for him to go in there to help Bryce Young try to revitalize that career, because you get the sense that this is a break or break year for Bryce Young if he wants to
It
continue
is.
playing in the NFL. So that leads us now to the next pick, which is their division rival, the New Orleans Saints. And they are in a very interesting offseason, Johnson. They did sign Justin Reed, the safety from the Chiefs, as well as bring back Brandon Cooks, who originally started his career with the New Orleans Saints. They also re signed Chase Young and brought back tight end Juwan Johnson. Their team needs quarterback, corner, offensive line, wide receiver, and defensive line. The biggest story for the Saints right now is what is the status of Derek Carr going into this 2025 season. The rumor is he might not be able to play the entirety of the season, and we saw what happened last year with this team trying to play without him. It was a really up and down year. They had to use the name Spencer Rattler. I was trying to think of the name off the top of my head. Spencer Rattler they had used for a little bit. He showed some flashes, but also showed some bad signs that will probably give you the sense that he's not going to be an NFL type starting caliber quarterback in the league. I'm going to do it, Johnson. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go with Jackson Dart, pick number 9.
Wow. Okay.
I think if Shador is here, it's a no brainer. They're going to take Shador. But if Shador is gone, Jackson Dart's kind of what we saw last year from Bo Nix, in my opinion. A guy that we expected to go in the second round, but as the following weeks have come up, he's garnered first round attention. I think he goes in the first round regardless, and I think the New Orleans Saints are going to be that team. If Shador is not there, Jackson Dart will go to New Orleans at pick number 9. So maybe our first, surprise of the entire night. I'm going to go with Jackson Dart at pick number 9 to go to New Orleans and be their starting quarterback for 2025.
I'm gonna see a bunch of people saying what at the same time right now because how this draft is gone.
Yeah,
Number 10, Chicago. They trade for Joe Fooney. They have a bunch of signed a bunch of players. They need
a lot
O
of
line,
offensive
D
line help.
line. Pretty much, they need offensive line, defensive line, running back,
Build
safety,
up the
and tight
trenches,
end.
Johnson. Build up those trenches.
And I don't know where they go here, honestly, because I know they're gonna. You just took Jackson Dart here, and for Chicago, I think the biggest need is running back. Obviously, if Genty is here, they're gonna take Genty in real life, but I don't know who you take here. Maybe you take.
I could give you some guys that maybe they could look at if you need
I
some
think you
help.
take Starks out of Georgia here.
That's one of those guys
I think
I
that's
could
who
get
you
behind.
take. They need safety, and he's best pick available. If I'm them, that's who I'm gonna take.
Okay, Malachi Starks out of Georgia. Yeah, he's kind of a hybrid player because he could play safety, but he could also play linebacker as well if needed be. So
They need
he's
both.
kind of the best of both worlds. If he were to go to the Bears, and I think the other good thing about it too is, you know, if the Bears don't want to go there, I've also seen maybe they go after Tyler Warren. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they look at Tyler Warren if he's fallen to this point. Warren's another guy that could be. A lot of people think talent wise is a top 5 player in the draft. It's just kind of tough to take a tight end like that high in the draft. That's the other issue with it too. But I don't hate the pick. I like Malachi Starks. I think he's a very solid player, very young, as I mentioned, can play multiple positions if need to be on the Bears defense, whether that's at safety or at linebacker for that pick. And that then leads us to the San Francisco 49ers at pick number 11. The Niners, we know what happened last season. A lot of injuries happening along the way. They lost a lot of players as well this previous offseason. They weren't really able to do much in terms of bringing back players. They only brought back Kyle Juszczyk of note. They did sign Mac Jones to be their backup quarterback as well as bring in Demarcus Robinson for their wide receiver front because, as we saw, they traded Deebo Samuel away. So now they have Brandon Ayuk and Robinson as the top 2 guys in there in Santa Clara. Their team needs are defensive line, edge rusher, offensive line, running back, and corner. It's tough for me right now because I normally would have gone defensive end in this spot, and I might still do it. I think the problem is Armand Membu, the tackle out of Missouri, who I think is going to go in the, if, like I said, if the Jets don't get Will Campbell, then they're going to take Membu out of Missouri. But if Membu's there at pick 11 for the Niners, I just can't see a spot where they pass him. I know they need the edge rush help, but they also need tackle help because eventually, they're already having issues on the offensive line. That was a big reason why they had such a bad success rate last season. So I'm going to go with Armand Membu out of Missouri, the tackle, to go pick number 11 to San Francisco.
All right, that makes sense to me. Got to bolster that line, and that's going to bring us to speaking of teams that need a line or have one of the best lines in football historically, the Dallas
Well,
Cowboys.
used to, yeah.
Yeah, used to have one of the best lines in football. Dallas Cowboys had a busy offseason. Not really. They got Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. They re-signed Devontae Turpin. They
Osa
acquired Joe
Digizua brought
Milton.
back.
Yep, so they had a quiet off season, quote unquote. They need receiver, running back, corner, linebacker, and D line here. And I think with that being said, I think they go Walter Nolan here.
Is
With
it
him
Mississippi?
still, yeah. With I think Ole Miss.
Ole Miss, yeah.
Yeah, at Ole Miss.
Okay. Yeah, I don't. It's not bad either. I mean, Nolan is I think is one of those guys that can play hybrid too. He can play defensive interior or can play on the edge as well. So it does help the Cowboys in a sense. It'd probably be between him or Mike Green from Marshall with that pick at defensive
And I
end.
think Jerry Jones is the guy to take Power 5 over. I don't want to say mid major, but
Yeah, I can get behind that. Walter Nolan is a guy that also could be maybe a top 10 pick if a team wants to take a shot at him, which is not a bad idea. So we'll see if they do that. That leads us to our next pick, that being the Miami Dolphins at pick number 13. They have made a couple moves this offseason. They signed James Daniel, the guard for the Pittsburgh Steelers, as well as bringing Nick Westbrook Akine, who had a nice season with the Titans last year. I think he had about 10 touchdowns. Might have just been under a touchdown away from 10, but I know he had a high touchdown rate last year. They also signed Alexander Madison and Zach Wilson. Nothing really to brag about, but it does help you in a sense of, if Tua gets hurt, you have a backup, I guess. Team needs are offensive line, defensive line, corner, safety, and tight end. And the rumor right now is, Johnson, is that they might be trading Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey might get traded in the next couple of days. I don't know if it's going to happen. It could happen very well during this draft.
But
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, but if that happens,
if that does happen, and even if they don't do it, I still think they go corner. And I know Will Johnson out of Michigan.
Yeah, I think he's one of the top corners in the draft.
He was projected to go in the top 10 easily months ago. And it's been a mixture of injury concerns as well as some of these other players, like going in the first, like, for example, like Jackson Dart is one of those guys that might take away his top 10 pick stats for him because of a team that needs a quarterback. And, guys like McMillan could go ahead of him. And we've seen what's happened the last couple, what's going on with Shador and all that stuff. Johnson is a top 10 player going into this draft. He has the capability of being so. It just injuries have moved him down to the board. But it's still a great spot for Miami to pick him at 13.
And I have Indianapolis for number 14 on the clock here. Indianapolis had a big offseason. They signed Javarius Ward, Cameron Bryant, and of course, Danny Dimes.
Yeah, of course.
They need tight end, O-line, linebacker, edge rusher, and running back. Colts needing O-line. Gee, I would have never guessed.
Oh, they lost two of their big offensive linemen this offseason, so it does make sense.
So, what's that hybrid position when you need like a receiver and like sometimes you can block? What's that called again?
It's tight end.
Tight end. Yeah, and this guy Tyler Warren out of Penn State is the most Colts-like player I've ever seen in my life. This guy has Indianapolis Colt written all over him. So give me Tyler Warren out of Penn State to Indianapolis.
Yeah,
1,200 yards, receiving yards on the season.
Warren is literally that exact player that you mentioned. He is not only a receiver, but he's a really good blocking tight end as well. And for a team that lost some offensive linemen in the offseason, you're in a year where Anthony Richardson, this is also a make or break year for him because, not saying that Daniel Jones would be the guy that replaces him, but if Richardson has a bad season this year, the Colts might look at quarterback next year in the NFL draft. So they need some help on the offensive unit. Tyler Warren would be a great addition. And even if they can't get Warren, if he goes ahead of them, there's still another good tight end out of Michigan that I think will also go in the first round at some point, depending on, and I see a certain team that could take him. That might spoil a pick later on in the draft. I'm not going to say it just yet. But that very well could happen. And I think that's a nice pick for the Colts to get Tyler Warren at pick number 14, which then leads us to pick number 15, that being the Atlanta Falcons, who in the offseason, they lost a lot of players having to get cut because of salary cap issues because of that Kirk Cousins contract really coming back to bite them at the end of the day. They re-signed Jake Matthews. They did sign Leonard Floyd from the San Francisco 49ers. Their big needs are edge rusher, D-line, corner, O-line, and safety. And I have kind of a hybrid player, Johnson, that I think will fit the best of them because they need an edge rusher slash linebacker, in my opinion, right now on this team. I think Jihad Campbell out of Alabama is that type of player that can play both. So I will take Jihad Campbell out of Alabama to go to the Falcons because as we saw last year, we expected them to go defense. They went with Michael Penix. Now he's the quarterback this year, but they have to get him some help on the defensive unit. So I will go with Jihad Campbell out of Alabama to go pick number 15.
Makes sense to me. They need linebackers. So
Yes.
let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals at the halfway point of the draft now, number 16. They re-signed Trey McBride, which he's been a standout tight end for them. Signed Josh Sweat, Calais Campbell, and Dalvin Tomlinson, and they signed Jacoby Brissett, or I call him Jacoby Brissett because it's like a play on brisket, even though it's Brissett. They need O-line, wide receiver, edge rusher, D-line, and quarterback. And I think at 16, I think they swing and I'm gonna go with Mike Green here.
Mike Green.
I'm going with Mike Green. He's the second best. I think he's the second best or the first best edge rusher in this class, depending on who you ask.
He has such a great senior bowl that has propelled them to being, as you mentioned, either the number 1 or the number 2 defensive edge in this entire draft.
Yeah, and for a position they desperately need, it just kind of makes sense that he's going to fall to them.
And unfortunately, that ruined my chance at pick number 17 with the Bengals because if he was still there, it's a no-brainer. The Bengals have to go with him because
17 sacks on the season. I mean, that's something that Cincinnati desperately needs.
Oh yeah, but I mean, think about what the Bengals have been synonymously bad at these last couple of years, Johnson. It's been their defense. It has hurt them so many times, year in and year out, and they don't have any cap space to really do anything right now. Their offseason moves as follows. They did re-sign Jamar Chase to a new contract. They finally gave T. Higgins a contract after the whole franchise tag debacle. They brought back B.J. Hill. They brought back Mike Gesicki. They brought back Samaje Perine, who was on the Chiefs the last couple of years. And they're still in a contract holdout right now with Trey Hendrickson, so we still don't know his status. He very well could be traded at some point, maybe during this NFL draft. So maybe that's something to note as well going into Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Their team needs are edge rusher, safety, linebacker, O-line, and corner. So it's tough for me because with Mike Green off the board, now you have to look at some of the next best edge rushers or type players in this draft that could go at 17 that could really help this defense because they have to go defense at this point. They can't pick another offensive player. There's really no one other on the offensive front to get. And it's tough because I want to go edge rusher, but then I'm looking at Jahdae Barron out of Texas, and it's like, how much further can he really fall on this board? He's one of the top corners, in my opinion, in this entire class. If he doesn't go here, maybe you think about him with your next pick at the Seattle Seahawks at 18. Then he would probably then have to be next think about at maybe Denver. I think it's just one of those guys where you want to take edge rusher, but how can you really pass up a guy like Barron out of Texas? Because you still technically need corner help at the end of the day. I'm trying to debate if I want to talk myself into that or just go with one of these edge rushers like James Pierce or Donovan Azaruku.
I think you can take Barron here. He's a potential top 10 guy too. That's great value. I don't think you can go wrong with that.
I think it's one of those guys where you just have to take him. So I'm going to go with Jahdae Barron out of Texas. Again, the Bengals need the pass rush help desperately, but they also need corner help. Not as much, but it's a guy that you can't really pass up on. I think it's a guy that could easily go in the top 15, maybe top 12. I don't know if he'll go top 10 wise, but he's a very solid player out of Texas. So I'll go with Jahdae Barron out of Texas, the corner, to go pick number 17 in Cincinnati. What do you have next with your next pick?
At 18, Seattle had a big offseason. They finally, quote unquote, blew it up. They got rid of
no more Geno.
No more Geno. They got rid of got rid of DK, and they brought in Sam Darnold and Cooper Cup. So kind of replace them around the same age for both of them. Sam Darnold's obviously on the younger side of quarterback, and Cooper Cup's on the older side. But I
Yep.
guess they balance it out somehow. Whatever. They signed DeMarcus Lawrence and Marquez Scantling, excuse me, and they re-signed Ernest Jones and Jaron Reed. This team needs O line, wide receiver, quarterback, safety, and D line. And I think they still want to get younger with wide receiver to kind of pair up there. I think they got rid of Tyler Lockett as well, if I'm not
Tyler Lockett
mistaken.
is also gone. Yeah.
So it's between. Do I think they take Matthew Golden here? Do I think they take
You have some good receivers on the board if that's the route.
Luther Burden? It's tough here, depending on who you ask.
Buka, you could pair back. You could pair the two Ohio State wide receivers as well.
It's very tough because I think Emeka is a late first round pick, and I think Luther Burden is a late first round pick too. Matthew Golden is kind of the only one I can kind of justify based on. This is tough. If they're going to take a wide receiver here, which one I'm not sure. But I'm just going to say Matthew Golden from Texas to kind of make that wide receiver room a little bit
Okay.
younger. And he's going to have a great mentor in Cooper Cup. And Sam Donald will have someone to throw the ball to for a couple more years. So if that's the route they're going, give me a Matthew Golden.
Yeah, I think it's simple for that pick. It's either wide receiver or offensive line they go with in that one.
And they really need a center, but
yeah,
you're not taking any center prospects at 18.
There's no really dominant interior offensive lineman, in my opinion, in this draft. Like there's
not
a couple
until the second or late second, maybe early third round for center.
Yeah, there's a couple where it's like you think about them in the second round. You probably go in the third round for it. I think the pick that you had three receivers that easily make the case for that one pick. Burden, you mentioned, Buka from Ohio State, and Matthew Golden. I don't think you necessarily go wrong with either one of the three. I think you just got to decide on what is the guy that you think will fit the scheme more for that team. I think Golden's fine. I think that's a perfect fit for them no matter what. You mentioned it. They need a number 3 wide receiver outside of now your Njigba as well as Cooper Cup. I don't hate the fit it right there with him going to Seattle with, how they're trying to rebuild that offense now with Sam Darnold at the helm at quarterback coming up this season. That then leads us to pick number 19, that being the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who in the offseason brought back Chris Godwin, who did come off that big injury last year, but they were worried they were going to lose him. Big get to get him back for this upcoming season. They also brought back another year of Lavonte David, probably near the end of his career. You have to think maybe this might be his last season in the NFL. We'll have to see. They also signed Hassan Reddick, who, as we saw last year, had that whole crisis with the Jets. Finally was able to get a contract and then never really mounted up to anything for the Jets. The Buccaneers are at least hoping that maybe he could be something and go back to the old Hassan Reddick that he was a couple years ago with the Eagles as well as the Cardinals. And if you look at what they need this upcoming draft, they need a linebacker, a corner, an edge rusher, a safety, as well as some offensive line help. So looking at what's available on the board and trying to think about what they would probably do at this upcoming pick, I'm looking at what would be. I think Jalen Walker from Georgia right now is the one that's screaming the most to me. Is the guy that they would probably take. Corner, after what we've done already, it's starting to get a little bit thin. It's guys that you would have to be project picks at the end of this first round if you want to take them. And edge rusher wise, there's a couple of edge rushers. As a Ruaku, I apologize for butchering that name, from Boston College, as well as James Pierce is there from Tennessee. But I'll go with Jalen Walker out of Georgia. I think they will go with the linebacker. As I mentioned, they're going to probably need to at some point get some linebacking help once they lose Lavonte David. He's going to retire in the next year or two. So I think Jalen Walker could definitely help that case because linebacker has been a constant turnstile for them these last couple of years. They've had some very big misses at that linebacker position, and they could probably use some help with this draft. So give me Walker out of Georgia to go pick number 19.
And at 20, we have the Denver Broncos who signed Evan Ingram. My Pro Bowl tight end, Evan Ingram, is now a Denver Bronco.
Yeah, you're a Pro Bowl tight end, not my Pro Bowl tight end.
Easy there, pal. They need a running back, wide receiver, cornerback, tight end, and defensive line here.
They did some good things as well with the defense, so their defense is looking strong for next year.
And I think at this point I'm kind of shocked he fell this much. Give me Loveland out of Michigan, Colston Loveland going to Denver. That's a
You think
Denver
they'll go
pick.
tight end with their first round?
I think so. I again, if it wasn't for what he calls it, Tyler Warren, Loveland would be the consensus number one overall tight end.
So Loveland and Evan Ingram as the top two tight ends in Denver this year.
Yep.
And you know what? You know what's funny about that pick? Because in 2 picks, a certain head coach for the Chargers would be very, very angry with that pick to happen. So that's just some in-division
Drama.
rivalry. Drama if they were to do that. So Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan, going pick number 20 to the Denver Broncos. That leads us to pick number 21. And oh boy, what about this team's offseason, Johnson? The Pittsburgh Steelers. They got DK Metcalf, and he got into a big 5-year extension, so he's now a Pittsburgh Steeler to pair up with George Pickens. A great 1-2 combination they've got in Pittsburgh. They signed Mason Rudolph back. They also signed Kenneth Gainwell from the Eagles, so they have more running back depth as well as a backup quarterback. Right now, technically the starting quarterback, because they let go of Russell Wilson as well as Justin Fields. And they also signed Darius Slay and Juan Thornhill to bolster up that secondary. Their team needs as follows, and it's no-brainer. Quarterback with Mason Rudolph is the only guy there. Running back because they also let go of Najee Harris in the offseason. Defensive line, wide receiver, and offensive line. The Steelers are probably the weirdest team in this draft at the end of it because we also still don't know what the status of Aaron Rodgers is either. You know, he hasn't made it a notion of, I'm going to play next season, or no, I'm not going to play next season. I don't necessarily know what is happening with Rodgers and company. This very well could be a pick where the Steelers make the pick because they know Rodgers is going to play for them, or they make the pick and they say, you know what, if we get this guy, we still might have Aaron Rodgers or might just have to roll with Mason Rudolph for the season. So good luck to you if you try to do that. I don't know if that's going to really work out for you. I think they still make the pick that will be contingent on Rodgers, and it might be another shocker, Johnson. I'm going to go with another quarterback. I'm going Jalen Milroe out of Alabama.
All right, so that's like the 4th quarterback that's been taken so far.
4th quarterback in the first round.
And that is crazy work because I had this guy going like in the 3rd round, but that's whatever.
He's been the one quarterback linked to the Steelers in the first round, and the Giants are the other team. And the Giants' only way of getting him would be trading back up into the first round. They would never take him with the 3rd overall pick. That's at least I
never
hope
know.
They never do that. I don't wish that upon me. If I've seen Daniel Jones, please don't. The Steelers, as I mentioned, even if they took Milroe, they don't necessarily have to play him this year. They could just play Rudolph and let him mentor with Tomlin as as they have a good head coach to mentor under. But if you sign Aaron Rodgers for a season, then that's even better. You don't have to play Milroe. You just bring in Rodgers, let him go this season, and let Milroe learn under him. I don't think it's necessarily the worst case scenario for the Steelers if they go quarterback. And if you look at the board right now as it follows, I'm not really seeing anything that pops out to me that's like, they have to take this guy because they're in desperate need of it. They could find some of these players in the 2nd, 3rd rounds. I think if you get Milroe, you at least potentially find your franchise quarterback in the next couple of seasons. As I mentioned, don't have to play him in year 1. Let him rest for maybe a year, maybe even 2, depending on how long they want to go with it. So I'll go with another stunner. I'll go with Milroe at pick number 21 to Pittsburgh. What's our next team?
At number 22, we have the LA Chargers here. San Diego Chargers? San Diego Chargers, excuse me here. They signed Mekhi Becton and Najee Harris. They also signed Mike Williams and Tyler Conklin. They re-signed Khalil Mack and Elijah Molden, and they signed Dante Jackson and Trey Lance. They need tight end, wide receiver, D-line, running back, and edge rusher.
They are still fuming that you picked Colston Loveland.
But they're going to get Luther Burden III out of Missouri here.
Okay.
To kind of bolster that wide receiver core that's non-existent.
Well, they have Ladd McConkey.
And?
they have him.
And, they're going to play triple coverage on him and just let the NPCs, if you have NPCs out there, let's be real.
They brought back Mike Williams after his 1 year with the Jets.
Oh yeah, let me get the confetti out for Mike Williams.
If he's,
Let's be real.
I mean, knowing him, he'll probably get hurt again. Hopefully, for his sake, that's not the
Great
case.
talent, but like you need more.
Yeah, you do need more. That's fair. Yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, again, you can't go wrong with either. It's kind of like the Seahawks pick. It's you have two receivers there in Abuka and Burden. Can't really go wrong with either one. I like Luther Burden. He was a really good talent last year at Missouri. So the Chargers get him at pick number 22. And that leads to pick number 23. That's the Green Bay Packers, who in this past offseason signed Aaron Banks, the big offensive lineman from the 49ers. They signed Nate Hobbs, the corner from the Raiders. And they signed Mecole Hardman, who, of course, caught that game winning touchdown in the Super Bowl a few years ago. They re signed Brandon McManus, their kicker. And their big team needs going into this draft are corner, wide receiver, edge rusher, defensive line, and offensive line. They're another weird team because if they were to go receiver, it would basically be what they already currently have a receiver, where it's like it's a guy that you're not going to have. You're not drafting a guy that's going to be your number one receiver right now. He kind of like Abuka, for example, is like a Jaden Reed type player, or the sense of like he's not a true number one. He just fits what the Packers already have. So I don't think it would make sense for Green Bay to necessarily go on that route. The corner, again, it's what I said earlier. If you're going to take a corner at this spot, it has to be someone that you think that is a first round talent, worthy. Maybe Benjamin Morrison or Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. Morrison being, of course, from Notre Dame. I don't necessarily think you go with them in the first round. I think maybe if you want to trade back up in the second round, maybe you get one of those guys. I think there's just too many edge rushers in this spot in the draft that you probably have to take one of them. And I'm going to go with Donovan Ezaraku out of Boston College. And the reason for that being, Johnson, is if you remember, the old Boston College coach is the DC for the Packers, if I'm not mistaken. So I will just go with him at pick number 23.
It's all coming full circle, isn't it?
And yes, he was the former Packers, Boston College coach, Jeff Hafley. So as I mentioned, I'll go with Donovan Ezaraku from Boston College. Try to say that name 3 times. The defensive end from Boston College. Who's at pick number 24?
The Vikings are on the clock, and they signed Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. They acquired Jordan Mason, and they signed him to a new deal. They also re-signed Aaron Jones and Byron Murphy. They need cornerback, O-line, safety, linebacker, and D-line here. So, again, I don't really think you take a running back here because it's not like quarterback where you
Yeah,
jump up
they,
so hard.
they
But
shouldn't take a running back.
they could go
Not
Amari and
now, at least.
Hampton. They could go him.
Yeah, they
But
could.
I don't think they should go him. I think you take Kenneth Grant out of Michigan.
The defensive interior
D
lineman.
lineman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I
And
mean, Michigan.
on Poland, nothing against him, but just the reality of the draft.
Who was that player? I didn't hear it.
Mecca keeps on
Mecca,
drafting.
yes.
Ohio State. Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to be a first round pick. And honestly, he might be the next pick we have right here. I'm gonna make that case in a second, but it might be tough for some of the other players on the board as well. And that next pick is from the Houston Texans, who had one more of the weirder off seasons, in my opinion, because they re-signed guys like Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie and Danielle Hunter. They brought in C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Ed Ingram, and Christian Kirk via trade. They signed offensive linemen Cam Robinson, Laken Tomlinson, and Trent Brown. So some veteran presence on the O-line. But the reason being they did that is because they traded away Laramie Tunsil to the Commanders. And is one that really left a lot of people stunned and puzzled as to why exactly the Texans did that. And I think people are still wondering why the Texans did that at this point. And if you look at the draft, it's weird because if you look at the Texans receiving core right now, Tank Dell had another brutal injury that ended his season last year. You mentioned earlier Stephon Diggs is no longer with the team. So right now, it's just Nico Collins right now running around for the Texans, and they're still figuring out until Tank Dell comes back who is going to be that next guy. Now, you could get Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State, who, of course, would have the Ohio State connection with CJ Stroud. However, there's another Ohio State player that I think they go with in this pick, and I think that's going to be Josh Simmons, the tackle out of Ohio State. I think if you make that move to trade away Laramie Tunsil, that means that you like a lot of these offensive linemen in this draft. That you're probably just going to take one of them at this current spot. And again, if Simmons wasn't here, and I know he had some injury concerns going into this draft, considering he was injured last year, I still think the Texans could wait on him even because of signing all those offensive linemen, veterans that they signed. They could move him to the interior, which I think is very possible. So I'll go with Josh Simmons out of Ohio State to be going to the Texans at pick number 25.
And on the clock at number 26 are the Los Angeles Rams. Los Angeles Rams is a little strange.
St. Louis.
St. Louis, that's right. The St. Louis Rams are on the board at number 26. They re-signed Matthew Stafford to a extended deal. They also brought in Devontae Adams for a new target for him. They also re-signed Tutu Atwell, Alaric Jackson, and Jimmy G. They need a linebacker, quarterback, O-line, tight end, and wide receiver. And I think this is where Mecca goes now. I think this is where they take it. This is where Emeka out of Ohio State finally goes. That last wide receiver off the board, and I get it's going to be really dynamic there. They're going to have a lot of good. That's going to be a really great receiving room, and I think they're going to try to maximize Stafford's kind of maybe last 1 or 2 years
Last couple of years, yeah.
at a Super Bowl run, and this is how you do it. When you can get a great wide receiver on the cheap, especially this late in the draft, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it so many times already how he could easily go earlier in this draft, and he's had a kind of a fall, but the next couple teams, he definitely would have gone regardless. The Ravens would be a team that'd be in on him. The Lions would be a team in on him.
Commanders would take
be a
him.
team
The
on him.
Bills would take him. Any of these guys would take him.
Any of these teams would take him in the next couple picks. So I guess basically best player available, and I think that's the right approach right there for the Los Angeles Rams, which then leads us, as we mentioned, the next team being the Baltimore Ravens, who in this past offseason signed DeAndre Hopkins. They brought in Cooper Rush as their new backup, Chidobe Awuzie from the Cincinnati Bengals. They re-signed Patrick Ricard, the big one, of course, being Ronnie Stanley, their offensive tackle, as well as bring in Ben Cleveland back to resign him. Their team needs are offensive line, corner, safety, D-line, and edge rusher. I think this one's kind of another no-brainer for me. Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas, the tackle is still there. I'm going to go with Kelvin Banks Jr. I think they could use another tackle outside of Ronnie Stanley. That's kind of been what's been plaguing them these last couple seasons. And I think that's another guy that easily could go earlier in this draft, but is kind of just fallen because some of the other needs that these teams have needed these last couple picks. So I'll go with Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas to go to pick number 27 in Baltimore, and that will lead us to pick number 28.
Which is the Detroit Lions, and they really didn't do much this offseason. I guess signing DJ Reed is their big,
that was the
off-season
biggest move they made, yeah.
Yeah, and they, it's kind of just footnotes everywhere else. Let's talk about their team needs. They need, most importantly, an edge rusher, O-line, safety, defensive line, and wide receiver.
Okay.
And
there's an edge rusher, all right, that I love.
Shamar Stewart.
Him too. Again, that's also fair.
That's who I'm going with here. He could be easily a top 20 guy, and if he's going to fall to 28, that's my edge rusher at this point. Is he the top edge rusher in the draft? No, but I think he's number 5. So that's where exactly I'm going to put him. You probably were favoring maybe James Pierce.
I was leaning towards him, but I don't. This is again the same thing with wide receiver. I don't think you can go wrong with this pick. Shamar is a great talent. James Pierce is a great talent. Nick Scordon is a great talent. Remember what the Lions' problem was last season. It's a reason why they lost in the playoffs. Once Aiden Hutchinson went down, the best next pass rusher they had left was Darius Smith, who they got in a trade with the Browns. They needed that pass rush help in that playoff loss to the Commanders. Shamar Stewart would be a great get for them. So you add him to Dan Campbell. I mean, oh boy, Shamar Stewart could be a great help to Aiden Hutchinson. And Aiden Hutchinson can even be a more bigger help to Shamar Stewart's success. No matter what pass rusher they get with this pick, they could be in line to have maybe a double-digit sack season, in my opinion. Not maybe in their rookie year, but definitely in year 2. So I like that pick a lot. I'm a big fan of Shamar Stewart. I know you are as well from your Texas A&M Aggies. And that leads us now to number 29, that being the Washington Commanders, who have had one of the busier off seasons we've seen this recent memory. And I mentioned earlier they traded for Laramie Tunsil from the Houston Texans, but they also got Debo Samuel from the San Francisco 49ers. So another target now for Jaden Daniels outside of Terry McLaurin, a now new blindside blocker in Laramie Tunsil. They also brought in Javon Kinlaw, as well as re-signed guys like Zach Ertz, Bobby Wagner, and Noah Brown, as well as Marcus Mariota as a backup. Their big team needs are also edge rusher. They need corner, wide receiver, safety, and all line. And they're pretty much in the same boat with the Lions. There's so many edge rushers on the board. James Pierce, I mentioned the last pick. I like him at the Lions pick. I like him even better at the Commanders pick. So give me James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee to go pick number 29.
So is this the edge rusher draft now? Like this is what we're all picking because the Buffalo Bills need an edge rusher, and they're up next at number 30.
They could go with edge rusher, but there's also some other team needs they could have. What have they done this offseason, Johnson?
So Josh Allen's on a new deal now. They re-signed Khalil Shakir, Greg Rousseau, Terrell Bernard, Christian Benford. They also signed Joey Bosa, which was shocking. It's shocking, but it's not shocking that he got let.
I think it was shocking because everyone expected him to go play with Nick in San Francisco.
Yeah, that was the more shocking part that he chose Buffalo. But anyway, they also signed Josh Palmer here, so that's another big get for them. Streaky receiver, but he's still pretty good. They need a cornerback, defensive line, wide receiver, as I mentioned before, an edge rusher, and of course a safety. Is it crazy where I think they take the Everett A&M edge rusher now? I think they take Skirton.
They could go to Nick Scordon, yeah.
I think they take him.
That's your prediction.
Yeah, number 30. Give me Nick Scordon here to Buffalo.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, the Bills. You gotta remember, they're still in that big contract with Von Miller. They're trying to get out of that at some point. Actually, didn't they get out? Now I'm thinking about it, didn't they get out of that contract already? If I'm not mistaken. No, I think he's still there. Yeah, he's still there. I'm thinking of someone else now. I'm thinking about that. Or am I right? Am I wrong, Johnson? Didn't Von Miller get cut?
I believe he got cut.
I think he did get cut. He did. Okay, I was right. It was one of those moves where, I'm trying to remember if he did get cut or not, but he did get cut. Yeah,
I know. If this was 5 years ago, it would have been noteworthy. But
that contract,
not noteworthy anymore.
That contract really bited them in the backside. They thought after the year he had with the Rams, he was going to be the guy that he was on the Broncos. That was not the case. So they definitely need a pass rusher, even though they signed Joey Bosa. You can't necessarily know what you're getting out of Joey Bosa because of the injury concerns, and he's only on a 1-year deal. So you would like to maybe lock up that position.
He had 14 sacks in 3 years in Buffalo. He had multiple seasons in Denver where he had 14 or more sacks. Yeah. So not the same player.
All right, then that leads us to the final two teams, Johnson, and we'll start off with the team that was the runner-up in the Super Bowl last year. Of course, you're happy that was the case. That being the Kansas City Chiefs, who in the offseason, they franchise tagged Trey Smith for another season. We talked about Joe Thuney earlier getting traded away. So that offensive line that got beat up in the Super Bowl has now thinned down going into this season as well. They re-signed Nick Bolton, Kareem Hunt, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Hollywood Brown. They signed Jalen Moore on the offensive line. They also brought in Elijah Mitchell. Gardner Minshew is now the new backup, as well as bringing corner Christian Fulton. Some of their team needs are D-line, O-line, edge rusher, safety, and wide receiver. They have to go O-line. After what we saw in the Super Bowl, they have to go offensive line. I don't see a scenario where they don't pick anything outside of the offensive line. I'm going to go with Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State to go pick number 31.
Remember, it's not Power 5, not a Power 5 guy. I guess it's Power 4 nowadays. So
yeah,
take it with caution here.
Yeah, I think if it's not him, it's going to be probably Connerly out of Oregon. Zabel, the reason I picked him here, Johnson, is because he's a tackle, but also can play inside. And with them trading away Thuney, who was a guy that last year played guard to start off, but with an injury at tackle, they moved him outside. That's the only reason why I took him in this spot, because I think he's one of those guys where if someone gets hurt, then, oh, look, they have Zabel there. Move him to play this position. He could play center, too, if Creed Humphrey were to go down. I think he's another guy that easily probably could go earlier in this draft, but with the way that our board has fallen, I think the Chiefs, even though they don't necessarily take these guys often, at not being a non-power five or whatever, not Division One, whatever they want, FBS, FCS, I still think they take them just because of the hybridness of how many positions he could play on that offensive line. So I'll go with Greg Zabel as my final pick for this 2025 mock draft. But we still, of course, have one more pick left. And as unfortunate as I hate to say it, it is from the reigning Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles.
You mean the reigning, defending, undisputed Super Bowl champions, Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah.
They
Go ahead.
re-signed
Tell
Saquon
us what they
Barkley,
did.
Lane Johnson, Cam Jurgens, Zach Bond. They also acquired Kenyon Green and Dorian Thompson Robinson. They signed A.J. Dillon, Aziz Ojulari, Josh Uchi, which pains my soul, and Adoree Jackson.
I swear to
They
God, if
need
Aziz Ojulari has a 10-sack season, I'm going to cry.
they need safety, D line, cornerbacks, O line, and edge rushers. And you know who really can garner a lot of sacks? Now that you mentioned it, Michael Williams out of Georgia could really garner a lot of
How
sacks.
many times have they picked Georgia players as well?
It makes sense with the culture there, and
Yeah,
they need an edge rusher, so like it's
it makes
almost a match
so
made in
much
heaven.
sense. It makes so much sense. They
Especially he's
always
potential to
pick
be a
Georgia guys.
top 15 pick here, and he falls all the way down here. I did that for the script, by the way. I did
You
that
did,
solely for the script. I was
yeah,
hoping he was gonna fall to the Eagles so I could pick him last, and I guess it worked.
yeah. No, it worked out. I mean, I like the two script picks you made in this draft with Colston Loveland going to the Broncos and spurting the Chargers, and of course Jim Harbaugh. And then you did that pick with Michael going to the Eagles because, as I mentioned, they've taken how many Eagle players the last 5 years, pretty much since the 2020. It's been a bunch. It's been pretty much their bread and butter these last couple of years. Listen, you want to be a winner and win a Super Bowl, you pick winners that have won a lot of games in college football the last 5-10 years. So it makes sense. So that wraps up our draft. I'll do a quick recap of our picks for the draft. Cam Ward, I'll go, and obviously this is in order. Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Ashton Genty, Mason Graham, Shador Sanders, Will Campbell, Tedero McMillan, Jackson Dart, Malachi Starks, Armand Membu, Walter Nolan, Will Johnson, Tyler Warren, Jihad Campbell, Mike Green. That's the first 16 picks. For the final 16, it's Jade Barron, Matthew Golden, Jalen Walker, Colston Loveland, Jalen Milrow, Luther Burn III, Donovan Ezeraku, Kenneth Grant, Josh Simmons, Emeka Egbuka, Calvin Banks Jr., Shamar Stewart, James Pierce Jr., Nick Scorden, Gray Zabel, and Michael Williams to round out the draft. And we talked about, how deep of this draft is in terms of running back and defensive line, corner, receiver. On Marion Hampton, I wanted to take at the Commanders pick at 29. I was about to do it, but then, Pierce was still there on the board for me. And even if you didn't take Shamar Stewart, I probably would have taken Shamar Stewart there. But Marion Hampton is a guy to watch out early second round. He probably gets taken early in the draft. He's
Do you
been
know
a
how
guy
many
that's
edge rushers
starting.
we took in the first round? By the way,
I'd have to count, but it's a lot.
we took like 7.
Let me do a quick count. 1, 2. That's
I think
only
we took 8.
and technically some of the linebackers and defensive interior guys could also technically count as edge rushers as well too. Keep that
It's
in mind.
Carter, Walker, Williams, Green, Stewart, Pierce. I'm not going
Scorden,
to Scorn and Ezeruku.
Ezuraku.
Ezeraku, excuse me, out of
That's
Boston
at least
College.
that's how I'm pronouncing it. It's probably wrong.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, guys like there's also those edge rushers as well, like Jihad Campbell that could be a hybrid. Um, you can look at as well. Like the linebackers could be hybrid defense, either hybrid middle linebackers or just edge rusher type linebackers. So there's a lot of these in the draft. Like I mentioned, this draft has a lot of hybrid players where we already know about Travis Hunter being the unicorn type hybrid player. But there's offensive linemen that can play multiple positions. There's defensive linemen and linebackers that can play either on the edge or in the interior or playing at a middle linebacker spot. And there's secondary guys that can play both corner and safety as well. Like there's just so much depth in this draft. And I get it, the quarterback room necessarily isn't great, but the outside of it, the rest of the draft really has a lot of good talent. where we could be talking about this draft maybe the next couple of years, and 5 years from now, being one of the better ones of all time. There's a lot of really good talent in this draft, and I'm very excited to see how it all unfolds on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Um, what do you, any final thoughts or any takeaways from the draft? I know I obviously made the two quarterback shocking picks, but what were any takeaways you have from this before we wrap this one up here tonight?
Thursday can't come soon enough because I have a feeling that we're gonna nail a couple of these. But if history teaches us anything, probably if it's 32 picks, I think we're gonna nail about 4 of them exactly, and there's gonna be 28 other picks that aren't even close. So take this with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I think if we get at least in the ballpark, it's not the worst thing either. I think the only
Within
certainties we
five.
have right now, I think the only certainties we have right now are maybe the top three. I think the top three, how we have it, I think is the top three that's going to go. After
Anything else
that,
is fair game.
I think everything else is a fair game. The Giants very well might not take Abdul Carter, and the Browns very well might not take Travis Hunter. Cam Ward is probably the only guarantee in this draft right now where he's going. And the only uncertainty with him is what team is it going to be? Is it going to be the Titans if they stay there, or would it be a team like the Giants or the Browns or the Saints or the Raiders moving up to pick number one to get Cam Ward to be the guy? I think Ward is the only guy that is a certainty to be at the pick that he's going to be picked at. So we'll have to find out and see what's going to happen on Thursday night. As I mentioned, there's going to be a bunch of current players that might get traded. Jalen Ramsey, I mentioned, and Trey Hendrickson might get traded as well. There's some guys to look out for in the upcoming draft this week to see if they get traded to a different team, and that might shake up the draft as well for other reasons than we already have. But another draft for us, Johnson, third one since we've started this show. I'm always looking forward to these shows every single year. I always look forward to the NFL draft. And I can't wait to do it again next year for our fourth annual one. It's going to be a fun time again, as always. And it's a sad note that we're ending it here tonight, but I did have a nice time doing this one with you here tonight. And I can't wait till Thursday to see if the Giants break my heart or at least take a guy I'd be okay with. So we'll have to see how I feel after this week. And of course, next week we will be breaking down some of the big picks in the draft, see how we did as well as our picks, and give our instant reactions to how our teams did as well on all 3 days of the draft and where our outlooks are going into the 2025-2026 NFL season. But that is going to do it for this week's edition of the All Gas No Breaks Short Show. Our third annual mock draft show is in the books. Tell us how you think that we did in our current picks for this year's draft. Will we see some of those shocking picks like we saw on tonight's show, like Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe? Maybe that happens on NFL Draft Night number one. Will we have 4 quarterbacks go like we had 6 last year? We could maybe have another shocker this year on Thursday of this year's NFL Draft. Tune in this weekend to see how it all unfolds, and tune back into our show next week for the recap of this year's NFL Draft. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by my co-host Andrew Johnson for the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week.